This is where powerful corporations finally pay for what they've done. A new case every week. For the last 60 years, you have been lied to. Not about something small, not about something abstract, about something you put in your body every single day. You were told fat was the enemy. You were told to eat low-fat foods. You were told sugar was fine. And millions of people developed heart disease, diabetes, and obesity while following exactly that advice. But here's what makes this story truly disturbing. It wasn't an accident. It was a purchase. Think about that for a moment. Every diet you've ever tried, every time you chose low fat over full fat, every time you counted calories and cut butter, every government guideline, every food pyramid, every doctor's advice about what to eat, all of it was built on a foundation that the sugar industry helped construct, not because it was true, but because they paid for it to be true. And the receipt has been sitting in a Harvard basement for 60 years. In 1954, the president of the Sugar Research Foundation, the trade group representing America's sugar industry, gave a speech. He described what he called a great business opportunity. If Americans could be persuaded to eat a lower fat diet, for their health, they would need to replace that fat with something. That something was sugar. America's per capita sugar consumption could go up by 1/3. It was a business plan disguised as a public health initiative, and they executed it perfectly. And the scale of what followed is almost impossible to comprehend. By the 1980s, the low-fat movement had taken over. The US government released dietary guidelines telling Americans to reduce fat consumption. The UK government followed. Australia followed. Canada followed. Supermarkets transformed overnight. Thousands of new low-fat products flooded the shelves. Low-fat yogurt, low-fat milk, low-fat everything. The food industry was making billions. And every single one of those products was quietly loaded with sugar to replace the flavor that fat had provided. The sugar industry had won, and they had done it without most people ever knowing their name. By the early 1960s, scientists were beginning to connect the dots between sugar consumption and heart disease. Studies were emerging. Concerns were growing. The sugar industry was watching, and they were worried. So in 1964, the Sugar Research Foundation launched what they called a campaign to address negative attitudes toward sugar. Their strategy? The same one Big Tobacco had used a decade earlier. If you can't disprove the science, manufacture doubt. Point the fingers somewhere else, and they knew exactly where to point it. Fat. If you made it this far, you already know this channel is for you. Hit subscribe so you never miss a story. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. Because what the Sugar Research Foundation did next wasn't just spin, it was a bribe. In 1967, two prominent nutrition researchers at Harvard University published a landmark review in the New England Journal of Medicine. The review examined the existing evidence on diet and heart disease. Its conclusion? Fat and cholesterol were the main dietary culprits. Sugar was cleared. The review shaped public health guidelines for decades. Governments around the world told their citizens to cut fat. Food companies rushed to produce low-fat products, replacing fat with sugar. Obesity rates climbed, diabetes rates climbed, heart disease rates climbed, and nobody questioned the Harvard study. Why would they? It was Harvard, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, the most prestigious medical journal on the planet. If Harvard said fat was the enemy, then fat was the enemy. Doctors believed it. Governments believed it. Food companies built entire product lines around it. And the sugar industry watched their sales climb year after year after year. While heart disease rates climbed with them. While diabetes rates climbed with them. While obesity rates climbed with them. The perfect crime, committed not with a weapon, but with a checkbook and a Harvard letterhead. Until 2016, when a researcher named Kristen Kearns discovered 31 pages of correspondence buried in a Harvard archive. What she found changed everything. The Sugar Research Foundation had initiated the study. They had paid the Harvard researchers, the equivalent of $50,000 in today's money. They had examined drafts of the paper before publication. They had laid out a clear objective: to protect sugar's reputation. And not one word of this was disclosed when the study was published. Marion Nestle of New York University, one of America's most respected nutrition scientists, called it so blatant. "Funding research is ethical," she said. "Bribing researchers to produce the evidence you want is not." But the Harvard bribe was only the beginning. Because the sugar industry didn't just corrupt one study. They corrupted the entire conversation about nutrition for half a century. In 1965, the Sugar Research Foundation secretly funded a scientific review that downplayed evidence linking sugar consumption to dangerous blood fat levels. In 1968, they funded their own research project with lab animals, and when the preliminary results suggested sugar might be linked to bladder cancer and heart disease, they pulled the plug on the study. They buried it. They never published the findings. They never told anyone. The scientist who led that study later said he believed the industry ended the project specifically because the results were inconvenient. Using a playbook identical to Big Tobacco, the sugar industry tracked research, identified influential scientists, and approached them with a light touch to shape what the public believed about nutrition. By dealing with them with a light touch, they got what they wanted, said Stanton Glantz of UC San Francisco. The sugar industry used the same strategies, the same tactics, the same playbook. And it worked. For 50 years, dietary guidelines around the world told people to cut fat and not worry about sugar. The food industry responded by flooding supermarket shelves with low-fat products. Low-fat yogurt, low-fat cookies, low-fat ready meals. Every single one of them packed with sugar. Because when you remove fat from food, it tastes terrible. So you replace it with sugar. And the result? Between 1980 and 2014, global obesity rates doubled. Type 2 diabetes cases tripled. Heart disease remained the #1 killer on the planet. All while people were following the advice they had been given. All while they were eating the low-fat products they had been told were healthy. All because a trade group in the 1960s spent $50,000 to buy a Harvard study. So what has Big Sugar finally gotten that they deserved? In March 2025, a U.S. appeals court unanimously rejected Big Sugar's attempt to block a major Everglades restoration project. The court ruled completely against the sugar industry. In February 2026, 3 sugar manufacturers were fined $282 million for price fixing. The regulator called it one of the most serious cases of collusion ever documented in the food industry. And in Minnesota, a massive granulated sugar antitrust case is now working through federal courts, accusing the biggest sugar companies of conspiring to fix prices for years while ordinary consumers paid the price. The total legal exposure for Big Sugar is growing every month. And for the first time in 60 years, people are asking the questions the industry spent decades trying to prevent. Big Sugar paid Harvard scientists to lie to the world. They pointed the finger at fat while hiding what sugar was doing to the human body. They buried studies that showed the truth. They shaped dietary guidelines for governments around the world. And for 60 years, it worked. Now the courts are catching up. Now the science is undeniable. Now the documents are public. Big Sugar is finally getting what they deserve. The only question is, after 60 years of lies, is it enough? If this video made you angry, good. That anger means you're paying attention. Hit the like button. Leave a comment. Share this with one person who still thinks fat is the enemy. It costs you nothing. But for a small channel like ours, every single interaction tells YouTube this story matters and helps us reach the people who need to hear it. We don't have a massive budget. We don't have a team of hundreds. What we have is you. And next week, we're covering a company that did something even more outrageous than this. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because you do not want to miss that one.